Discuss about REST API and some introductory part regarding Expressjs. Now we are going to continue with Expressjs request and response object. Here we will start with Expressjs request object. So here Expressjs request and response objects are the parameters of the callback function. These are the parameters of callback function which is used in Express applications. The express.js request object represents the HTTP request and has properties for the request query string, parameters, then body, HTTP headers, and so on. So these are the parameters for or the properties for that request query string. So here this is the syntax for request object here. App.get inside the bracket in single quote slash comma function containing the parameters request comma response and the body of that function and close the get function here. This is the syntax for this request object here. Express dot request object having some properties. So this is the table having properties for that request objects. First one is request dot app. So that request dot app means it is used to hold a reference to the instance of the express application that is using the middleware. Then request dot base URL. It specifies the URL path on which a router instance was mounted. Then third one is request.body. It contains key value pairs of data submitted in the request body. By default, it is undefined and it is populated when you use body parsing. Body parsing middleware like body parser. In last sessions, we have seen about body parser. The next one is request.cookies. When we use cookie parser middleware, this property is an object that contains cookies sent by the request. And next one is request.fresh. It specifies that the request is fresh and it is opposite of request.stale. Then next one is request.hostname. It contains the hostname from the host HTTP header. We will see all these properties later on. Then next one is request.ip. It specifies the remote IP address of that request. Then request.ips. When the trust proxy setting is true, this property contains an array of IP addresses specified in the forwarded for and request header. Then next property is request.original URL. This property is much like request.url. However, it retains the original request URL that allows you to rewrite that URL freely for internal routing purpose. Then these are the several properties for that request object here. Then next one is request object methods. So first method is request.accepts and the parameter is types. So this method is used to check whether the specified content types are acceptable based on that request accept HTTP header fields. This method is used to check whether that specified types here. The parameter is specified types. So that specified content types are acceptable or not. So example for this method is request.accept inside the bracket HTML. So this type is acceptable or not. It will based on that request it accept that HTTP header field. So next one is request.accepts. We can write like text slash HTML. Then next method is request.get and the parameter is field request.get inside the bracket field. So this method returns the specified HTTP request header field. It returns the specified request or specified HTTP header fields. So example for this request.get inside the bracket content type. It will return the content type. Okay. Then next method is request.is or inside the bracket type. So this method returns true if the incoming request is content type. HTTP header field matches that MIME type specified by the type parameter. So it returns true if that incoming request is content type. See the example for this, like with that content type is text slash HTML and character set is UTF-8 encoding technique. See the request dot is inside the brackets in single quote HTML, then request dot is in single quote text slash HTML. This is the content type. Request dot is text slash star. So these are the ways we can write this type here. So it will return the true if that content type is matches with the MIME type specified parameter. The next method is request dot param. That is name of that parameter here. See the parameters are name and default values. So this method is used to fetch the value of that param name and when that present. It is used to fetch the value of that parameter name when it is present. See the example here. Name, suppose name is equals to like Sasha, then request dot param inside the bracket give the parameter as name with that value. Like we can directly do here. You can see the name. First we are going to declare the name. Okay. Then see post here. Now it will return the name as Sasha. When we are going to like write like request dot param inside the bracket name. So it will return the name we have declared here. Then like see post name is equals to Sasha. Then if we write like request dot param inside the bracket name, then it will return the name of that attribute or that parameter here. Okay. Now we will see the Expressjs response object. So previously we have seen the Expressjs request object and the methods for that request object. Now we are going to see the response object. So here the response object, see the RES, we are going to write in the function request and response. That R is for the response object. It specifies the HTTP response which is sent by an Express app when it gets an HTTP request. After getting that request, it will send the response to that application. So what it does, it sends a response back to the client browser. Response back to the client browser after that incoming request. It facilitates you to put new cookies value and that will write to the client browser. Then once you response.send or response.redirect or response.render, you cannot do it again. Otherwise, there will be an uncaught error. You can write only once that send method, redirect, and render method. You cannot do this again. It will show the error for that. So see the properties for that response object. Like first one is response.app. So it will holds a reference to the instance of Express application that is using the middleware. Then headers send response.header sent. It is a boolean property that indicates if the app sent HTTP headers for the response. Then response.locals. It specifies an object that contains the responses, response local variables and response local variables scope to that request. So these are the three properties for response object. Response.app, response.headers sent and response.locals. So now we are going to see the methods for that response objects. So first one is response append method. See the syntax for response append method. res.append, response.append, and the parameters are field and values. So this method appends the specified value to the HTTP response header field. That means if that specified value is not appropriate, then this method readdress that. Readdress that. See, this method appends the specified value to the HTTP response. See the example for that append method. Response.append inside the bracket give the field name like link and the values. Here you can see response.append warning comma and the value, that warning message.